Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Come in, come in. Join us around the table. Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Good evening.
and welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. Good evening. We'll just give one more, maybe 30 seconds to get everyone in. See a few more in the waiting room. And then we will get started. Good evening. I think the doorbell is slowing. I see some head nods, and it looks like that to everyone else. It's slowing down a bit.
Students, Joel, a teacher. This time it happened in South Texas at Robb Elementary School.
Yeah. How appropriate it is tonight. Good evening, Felicia. Good evening. Thank you for adding to the chat. Good evening. And good evening from Bucks County. We see you. All right. Greetings, everyone. My name is Tanya Longino, and I'm the chair of the Eastern Area National Trends and Services Facet. And we are delighted to have you join us for this evening's event, our Green Table Talk, Building Resilience in Our Children and Our Families. Tonight, we're featuring very special guests, some phenomenal panelists, and we invite you to join us in the chat if you'd like to share resources, experiences, please do so. But while our guests are warming up and getting ready for us, I'd like to acknowledge and also welcome in our special guests and organizations that are sponsoring tonight's event. Our Eastern Area Director, Dr. Shawana Tucker Sims, Jack and Jill of America, the Eastern Area Regional Director, Melinda Alex Hayes. She's also a member of the Links Incorporated. The Eastern Area Program Coordinators, Anna Maria Bishop Harris and Nakina Douglas Glenn. My partner in collaboration with tonight's event, the Eastern Area Health and Human Services Chair, Siobhan Arline Bradley. Eastern Area Health and Human Services Co-Chair, Dr. Anjanette Ferris Senatus. And forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Our Eastern Area National Trends and Services Co-Chair, who is also my partner in all things National Trends and Services, Carla D. Brown. Our Eastern Area Mental Health Chair, Dr. Cecily Horsham Brathwaite. And our Eastern Area Mental Health Committee members, as well as our committee members who sit on the Eastern Area National Trends and Services Committee. Our national officers, appointed, and executive council members, welcome. All members of the Links Incorporated. Members of Jack and Jill of America, thank you for joining us. And all of our very special guests, we thank you. I want to turn the mic to my dear sister and friend, Siobhan, to bring us greetings and to center us in this moment as we join this evening around the green table. Siobhan.
And Tanya, thank you so much. It is fitting that I'm here this evening. And I'm reminded as a member of the clergy, as a proud member of the Links Incorporated, as a Jack and Jill mother of a second grader, our hearts are all bleeding today. Our hearts over the last 10 days have been stretched, to say the least. But there's a verse in the Bible that says, weeping endures for the night, but joy absolutely comes in the morning. But we are now weeping. We are weeping for the souls of 14 children in second grade, third grade, and fourth grade in Texas. We are weeping for a Taiwanese church in California. And as predominantly Black women, we are weeping at the murder of 10 Black women and Black men in the city of Buffalo, New York. As we pause for this moment, we are thinking of our Link sisters who are in Buffalo and our Jack and Jill mothers who are in Buffalo. Our Link sisters, even in Texas, and Jack and Jill mothers who we do not know if they've been affected by this school shooting. But I will tell you this, many of us have felt this personally. For those of us that have had children or have had to take care of children, the loss of life at that age is incomprehensible. But I will tell you today that we will not rest as members of the Links Incorporated. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, but also of a sound mind. We have a sound mind today because who knew that God would have to send his servant, Dr. Taylor, to come, our Link sister, to support us in this moment. But I'd ask that you would just close your eyes with me and just take a moment to reflect. Reflect that we are able to log on to the screen right now and someone cannot. We are able to gather together and someone cannot. But tonight that we as women of the Links Incorporated and those of us that are mothers of Jack and Jill of America will commit our lives to the well-being of our children and the well-being of our people. We know that God makes no mistakes, but man does. And there's sometimes no explanation for this kind of pain. But be encouraged, my Link sisters. Be encouraged, Jack and Jill mothers who have joined us and Jack and Jill fathers who are on the line today. Because our connectedness tonight, hands locked as one community, we will make a difference today. So God, as we take a moment to thank you for life, we cover those that are in mourning, those who went to pick up their child, never to see them again. God, we offer this prayer for those that will have to now plan funerals, those that will now go through a grief that we can't even stomach. God, we pray that this country changes her ways, that there will be the appropriate legislation put in place, that we will stop accepting this as the norm and know that this is not your will. Give us the serenity to do what we need to do as an organization and as a Black community, to commit ourselves to fighting for freedom and justice for all. We thank you now for this time. It's in your name we do pray. Jesus' name, amen, and thank God. Well, my Link sisters and my Jack and Jill families, although it is a difficult day, it is an important day to make mental health a priority, and it is my profound honor to introduce to you our leader in the Eastern area of the Links Incorporated. Not only is she our leader in the Links Incorporated, she is also an associate mother of Jack and Jill of America, the proud mother of a HBCU son. I want to introduce to you Dr. Shawana Tucker Sims. Madam Area Director, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Link Siobhan, for that introduction. And also thank you for your prayer and for centering us and reminding us that in the Links, as well as in Jack and Jill, we all have a voice and we must continue to let our voices be heard especially around the subject of gun violence. It has happened for too long now, and occurrences continue to happen now, and they seem to be more frequent. And so we must have a voice at that table and let our voice be heard, that it must stop. So thank you so much. On behalf of the 83 chapters throughout the Eastern area of the Links Incorporated, and my partner and friend, Melinda Alexis Hayes, the Eastern Region Director of Jack and Jill of America, we welcome all of our members and guests to the Green Table this evening. We are proud and pleased to partner with the Eastern Region of Jack and Jill of America on tonight's program, and we thank their leadership and members for supporting this effort. This is the latest in our Eastern Area Links Green Table Talk series. We started this series in the fall of 2019 to feature conversations with influencers and experts on timely topics impacting our members and our communities. We believe that tonight's discussion, Real Talk, Building Resilience in Our Children and Families, is exactly what is called for to not just survive, but to thrive in times such as this. I define resilience as the ability to successfully withstand and adapt to unpredictable changing environments. We are all too familiar with the numerous things that have disrupted life as we knew it in the last 2 years, including a global pandemic, a widening gap between the haves and have-nots, escalating hatred and intolerance threatening civil, legal, and social rights. Yet, through it all, we are still standing. Praise God, that is resilience in action. But the question is, what does it take to create and sustain resilience when the challenges just keep going on and on? So one of our priorities in the Eastern area of the Links is total wellness of mind, body, and spirit. Stress and fear take their toll on all three. So as we near the end of Mental Wellness Month, we are especially aware of the ways that these times have exacerbated mental distress and illness. We also believe that one of the best ways we can contribute to the wholeness of our children and our families is to help them build the resilience to endure. We are glad that we're being joined around the Green Table this evening by Janet Taylor, an expert in the neuroscience of courage and fear and author of The Courageous Classroom. Thank you in advance for sharing with us, Janet. This program is a result of the collaboration of multiple Eastern Area committees. I wish to thank our Eastern Area Links Health and Human Services Committee, chaired by Siobhan Arline Bradley and co-chaired by Dr. Anjanette Ferris-Senatus, our National Trends and Services Committee, chaired by Tanya Longino and co-chaired by Carla Brown, and our Mental Health Committee, chaired by Dr. Cicely Horsham-Brathwaite. Our children and our families are close to our heart. While we can't change the circumstances they face, we can help them build the resilience to change how they respond to it. Let's prepare ourselves to listen, learn, and be resolved to equip ourselves and those we love with this valuable skill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Area Director. And on behalf of myself, Siobhan Arline Bradley, the Eastern Area HHS Facet Chair, and Dr. Anjanette Ferris-Senatus, who is the co-chair, who is here with us tonight. It is our honor and pleasure to introduce one of our favorite committee members, let me just say. Dr. Cicely Brathwaite is an amazing leader in mental health. She not only is an expert in mental health, but she has also the distinct honor of chairing the Eastern Area's Mental Health Committee and serves nationally in the Links Incorporated on the Mental Health Committee. Dr. Cicely, we are excited to have you tonight and are entrusting this program with you and our esteemed guests. Dr. Cicely, we thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. I thank you for your leadership. I'm so delighted to be here. You know, this is our third mental health Green Table Talk. And when we began this, we knew that having the opportunity from our leadership to highlight total wellness, mental health was a special opportunity, and in fact, a sacred opportunity. And today, as we continue grieving the loss of those in Buffalo and those in Texas, I can think of no better place in this moment to be in community with the amazing speakers and panelists that we have for you this evening. Before I introduce them, I want to take a moment to say to you that in the Eastern area, I've had an opportunity to go to different chapters virtually and be invited to their events. And one event I went to, I had the distinct pleasure of being on a panel with an expert with lived experience helping and supporting families in a variety of ways, and to be on that panel with experts who had lived experience in the topic. They were young people talking about what it is like to be a young person. So tonight I'm going to introduce you to our esteemed speakers. And included in this list is Dr. Taylor and two very special guests that I look forward to introducing to you in a moment. I'd like to share Dr. Taylor's bio with you, a brief bio, so that we can get into the conversation. Dr. Janet Taylor is a community psychiatrist in Sarasota, Florida. The practice of community mental health is extremely rewarding to Dr. Taylor, because being on the front line with individuals and their families battling the emotional and economic impact of racial trauma, racism, anti-racism, implicit bias, and conscious allyship are important. She says also that being on the front line with individuals and their families battling the emotional and economic impact of mental illness is where she can make a difference. And talking on these important topics, as I mentioned, racial trauma, anti-racism, conscious allyship, also helps her to make difference. She graduated both undergraduate and medical school from the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, and has an MPH from Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. Dr. Taylor is the proud mother of 4 daughters. I can also tell you that Dr. Taylor has been awarded numerous awards. One of my favorites, the Women Who Dare Award, an outstanding faculty member award. She's a frequent contributor to media such as Good Morning America, CNN, and the Today Show. And as you heard, the author of Courageous Classroom. We welcome you, Dr. Taylor. And now I have the opportunity to invite 2 graduates of Jack and Jill to join Dr. Taylor in tonight's conversation as we sit around this green table. I have the opportunity to welcome Ms. Michael Michelle Longino. Less than a week ago, Michael Michelle graduated summa cum laude from Spelman College with a BS in English and a concentration in writing. Prior to graduating, Michael served as president of the Morehouse Spelman Pre-Law Society and a member of the Alpha Lambda Delta Honor Society. She is a Thurgood Marshall College Fund Apple Scholar. She interned at Apple for the past 2 summers and looks forward to beginning her professional career at Apple as a marketing specialist. You know, we love it when you have a job after graduation. And we'll be working on their growth marketing team in Culver City, California. Michael is committed to prioritizing the needs of African-American women and children, as well as amplifying the voices of Gen Z. Voting rights and reproductive rights are at the top of her advocacy list. We welcome you. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Booker Faria IV. Booker Faria IV is a technology, strategy, and advisory consultant at Accenture, responsible for assisting and innovating alongside clients to help them remain competitive in their respective industries. He has a wide range of experience with client relationship management, go-to-market strategy, cloud transformation, and executive level client innovation in various industries, including products, tech, health and public service, finance, and automotive. They're going to try to hire you after this, I'm telling you. Booker also enjoys giving back to the community through service organizations, including the Covenant House, Atlanta Community Food Bank, and Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Booker earned his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech and is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated by way of the New Mood chapter at Georgia Tech. I think we can all agree there is no one better this evening than to have an opportunity to hear from someone who has tirelessly worked and served in the community to support the emotional well-being of families, and for two young people who are demonstrating their resilience on a daily basis during these difficult times. So I thank you and I welcome you. So we have an opportunity as we sit around this virtual green table to just start off talking about, let's start with this. Let's talk about resilience, right? And I'd love to hear from each of you as you feel called to do so. How do you define resilience? And what are some of your key strategies for building and remaining resilient? So how do you define it?
So I'll jump in, and I want to thank you, Dr. Brathwaite, and hello, and thank you to all my Link sisters and to Madam Area Director and to the Jack and Jill people, families on, and certainly my co-panelists who make me proud just looking at you all. But, you know, resilience, I define resilience as the ability to bend but not break, which our brain and bodies were made for. We have so much strength. We have so much passion. We have so much energy that can go help us make it through difficult times. And unfortunately, so often we will give up our agency and our will to things outside of us without realizing what we have. So I see resilience as bending but not breaking, and not just making it through something, but actually thriving through, which means you learn from it, you keep pushing, you don't make the same mistake twice. And when I lived in New York, I worked in Harlem, I worked at Rikers, even in Florida, I've worked in jails. And what I have found is that resilience is not related to a zip code. It's not related to the clothes that you wear. It really is about your sheer determination and ability to get up facing every single day with a new attitude and being recharged and understanding that we all have to push towards our potential.
I love that. And I think I echo my definition of resilience, having to do with that mindset of getting back up after you fall down, but really focusing on that growth when you get back up, because resilience isn't just about, making it through another day, but I see it as how can I make, today better than yesterday? Or how can I learn from that mistake? Or maybe not even a mistake, how can I just make sure that while moving forward, we're growing and we're progressing. So yeah, I think it has to do with always making sure the focus on the journey is the big picture.
Yeah. So there's not too much more that I could really add. I think it's been pretty well covered. The one thing I'll say is one of my favorite poems would be "Don't Quit," and that has to do with one of the lines in that poem is "Rest if you must, but don't you quit." Because there are times that you'll need to rest. There are times that you'll need to slow down. There are times that you will need to stop, but you have no choice but to continue afterwards. So it's really about taking that time for yourself and understanding that you need to spring back into place and having a good place to spring back to in the first place. So I think it has to do with pacing yourself and running your race when you need to.
Thank you. Bending and not breaking, recognizing that you need to slow down. I think so often we think of strength as keeping going and pushing down. And so what I love that you uplifted is recognizing that we go through things. And while we may go through things, there is a day after, and there's healing that can come after. So I think that was so beautifully said. I'd like to ask this question, and Michael, Michelle, I'd like to start with you. So this has been a difficult 3 years or so, or like centuries, right? And I think about over these 3 years, from your various vantage points, I'd love to get your sense of what is the state of resilience that you see among Black children, Black young adults, and or families. So what do you think is the state of resilience?
So I think amongst young Black people, and speaking from my perspective in terms of college and Gen Z, I feel like the state of resilience has to do with, you just have to make a way. I feel like there's this pick yourself up by the bootstrap mindset, because for so long, longer than the past 3 years, we've just had to continue just to push through, no matter what social, political, economic unrest is ongoing around us, what we see on social media, we have had no choice but to push through. I think about pandemic, I think about the racial injustice, I think about all the police brutality, I think the state of resilience has been, we have to move forward because we have no choice. However, I think that I've seen a big surge in figuring out how we can help. So I think everyone decided in 2020 that it was no longer enough to just retweet or repost or create some type of Instagram graphic. Everyone said, how can we get up and make sure that our voices are heard? And I think that in terms of figuring out what version of resilience works for said group, I think that young people have done a good job and still working towards making sure that there are actions behind our anger. And so I think that the resilience now has to do with speaking up as much as possible.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I'll jump in. So I'm glad that Michael, it's Michael, right? Michelle, sorry, is optimistic, and seeing young people like Michelle and also Booker gives me optimism. But I think as parents, there's a reality that we need to face. There's two groups that we need to be very concerned about. From 1997 until 2000, actually take back 2001 to 2017, the rate of Black girls who have completed suicides has increased by 201%. And we don't talk about it enough, but our young Black girls are depressed, they're anxious, they're not necessarily telling us, our parents. If they're confiding in peers, they may not have peers who obviously are not trained therapists, but can be girlfriends. So I think we need to be concerned about the mental health of our young Black girls, and I have 4 daughters. And also during COVID, the group from 18 to 25, whereas, before COVID, before this racial reckoning that continues, stress in America was up. But that age group of 18 to 25, whereas most people reported their stress rates were up by 25%, in that age group, it was up 75%. So we need to pay attention to what's happening within our families. We need to talk to our young people about what it feels like for them and how they are coping with everyday stressors, and not be afraid to seek outside help, to break this stigma about what it means to see a psychiatrist or a therapist, or even, their primary care doctor. But I really want to sound some alarm bells about how our young people, the difficulty, as we as older adults are having coping, but certainly in that age group, we need to check in with our kids.
I'm so glad you brought up the topic of stigma. Let's stay on that topic for a little bit. And I'd like to frame this out in terms of, Dr. Taylor, what have you found effective in helping parents become willing to address these issues and send their children, or they themselves get treatment. And just to preview Booker and Michael Michelle, I'll invite you to talk about, what do you know from your vantage point and from your village around stigma? Have you made advancements that those of us in previous generations haven't quite caught up with? So I'm previewing that question for you and Dr. Taylor. So tell us, so what do we do with this stigma?
It's a great question, because I think we have to look at our own messages that we got from our parents about not talking about mental health issues or keeping our family business to ourselves, and certainly challenge that, understanding that our brain is in our body, and things that we take in from the outside, and certainly personality functions, all those factors can really play a big part in how engaged we are in our own lives and how we do what really we're on earth to do, is to, help others and reach our potential. And so we can't dismiss things that we see that may be warning signs that our children and teenagers, young adults may be depressed in terms of oversleeping, not working, not doing well in school, all those factors. So paying attention to that, understanding and finding resources within our community where people can go. And it doesn't always have to be a Black psychiatrist or Black therapist. You need someone who's confident and competent, not confident, but competent. And so having that in place, therapy for Black girls is a great resource. Talking to your pediatrician or primary care doc, talking to your friends, if your kids are in school, certainly confiding in guidance counselors to have that help there. Talking to our kids if we have existing mental health issues, depression or bipolar, what that's like for us. And then I'd say the most important aspect is getting our teenagers, our kids, our partners to put down social media and have face-to-face talks and spending time with our kids around the table, going for walks and finding that connectedness. There's a sense that we have, I think, that our teenagers are young adults. They're not. They're young teens. Their brain develops until they're 25. They need our guidance. Even if they push us away, they are still looking for us to lead them. So we really have to pay attention, I think, now more than ever, because with COVID-19, so many young people are lonely and isolated and getting most of their information from social media and just inundated with messages that don't serve them. So we really have to put extra attention into figuring out where our kids' heads are and what we need to do to certainly push them in that direction. So just, corralling your kids, like loving them, but spending that face-to-face time, and also talking to our kids about our own journeys and not making our kids feel like, if we've arrived because we have the right job or live in the right house, that just happened. Like, what happened along our journey, and having those conversations in a real way with our children so that we can both teach them, encourage them, and let them know that when they do fail, we are there to help them pick up the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And last, I think what a benefit, through all this has certainly been telehealth. And we know that through telehealth, young people are reaching therapists and having access that they didn't have. But that's only one aspect to their mental health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that there's lots of head nodding going on off screen where we can't see. In terms of having those conversations, and as you can see in the chat. And so we have, again, this wonderful, this beautiful, this unique opportunity to hear from folks who used to be the young folks, or however you define yourselves at this point, who we want to hear from you. Tell us, what are the things that we don't know around getting rid of stigma or openness to mental health treatment and support?
I can jump in. I think that in terms of I hate to say like what you don't know, but I can just speak from like where what I see in terms of the state of my peers. I feel like there's just a lot of numbness, I think, to our realities. And by numbness, I just mean we're just so used to just like violence and like brutality and gun violence. Like there's just so much that we've been used to since, like I just heard like Sandy Hook, and I just think of today, and I'm just reminded of how I felt, you know, a decade ago. And the weird part is now it's just I hate to say normalized, but I feel like my generation has just normalized some of the chaos that we live in. And I think that that is the state of like our mental health and how we talk about it and how we connect with each other. Because I will say, I do think that we do express ourselves. I think that we have different mediums to talk via social media. But I think that the difference now is the way that we express ourselves is just so raw sometimes. Like, I mean, I could go on TikTok and scroll for hours and see videos of people expressing themselves. It's not necessarily that I don't think that we aren't expressing ourselves. It's just that the language, there's the trauma dumping, there's no real organization to how we're coping. And I think that it's been this way for some time. So everyone's just used to just dumping or just tweeting or just saying anything. And then it becomes normal to just see a video of someone being, you know, brutalized, or just to see someone tweet, you know, today's not a good day. I might, you know, trigger warning, kill myself. But these are things that we see that'll get likes and retweets like it's normal. And I think that that is kind of the the way to summarize the generation, just numb. So I'm wondering, I think that the conversation in terms of solutions is, okay, how do we, or maybe you as older people, as the people who we look up to help lead us, meet us somewhere in the middle, because it is about, yes, connecting in person in those conversations. But if we're having the conversations in this digital era through technology, maybe there's a way to meet us there, or figure out ways to create some type of boundary, so that way the conversation isn't just trauma, but you know what, I see you, this is not funny, it's actually a cry for help. How can I make sure that we're helping each other rather than just saying, you know what, the world's just ending? Because I think that sometimes that's where we go.
To add to that, I think something that isn't talked about enough is asking people what your support systems are. 2020 sort of forced me to lean heavily on my support system, more than I think I've had to in recent memory. Not that I didn't need them before, but more there was really no choice but to turn to that support system. And what I was surprised with was that my support system leaned on me as well, and that we were able to use each other and help each other through everything. Young Black men especially, we don't talk about these things. Most of the time we kind of play that stuff off, but something that I've been pleasantly surprised to find through the pandemic is just how open and just how needed those kinds of conversations are with our own peers. So I think that's something that can be asked to young people. What are your support systems? And if they don't have them, then maybe it starts to become a conversation of how do we develop those? Because there's work, there's your coworkers potentially, there's your friends that you make at college, there's fraternities, there's sororities, but those don't guarantee they're going to be the right support system for you. So it's really about how do you find that support system, and are you actively searching for it? So I think that needs to be covered and addressed.
These are really just really powerful suggestions, right? To meet young people where they are, and to also ask, what do you have to support your needs? And to recognize that suicide rates are on the rise in our community, and we may not have been comfortable talking about that before, but those days are gone, right? And so I really appreciate your candor. The time is going by really quickly, so I'm going to ask you one question, And then we're going to go into audience questions. So audience members, we invite you to put your questions in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can for the time that we have. So let me ask you this question. There's so many I want to ask, but I want to take a moment to ask you, Dr. Taylor, part of your work is around racial trauma. And I wonder if you can give us a couple of suggestions around how parents, how mentors, advisors can help young people or those who are coming behind us understand how to deal with racially traumatic experiences.
Sure. And I just want to acknowledge the thoughtfulness of Booker and certainly Michelle. I want to, that trauma dumping, I've never heard that together. And that really is something I want to explore because it makes a lot of sense. The danger of it is that, you know, as we work through things, then we become stronger and it's a muscle. And the trauma dumping, which is real, and I think not just young people do it, but adults too, just flipping through or liking something or retweeting it and not dealing with it, I think is an issue that keeps people stuck and anxious. And so I really want to think more about that. But to your point about racial trauma, you know, years ago, it was thought that, you know, racism was just a thing, not by Black people, not by brown people, but by white people. Like you had to prove that something had happened to you that was racially motivated, and it was hard to do. And now by virtue of social media and cell phones and those videos that Michelle even alluded to, we can actually see in real time what happens. And so that reality in combination with 400 years of injustice that continues, with 400 years of pseudoscience that was really meant to erroneously show that Black people needed to be, you know, subservient or, you know, racialized, slavery that has persisted in medical books, you know, persists even in mental health in terms of from this false notion of who's intelligent or who's more likely to be depressed, who has access to treatment. All those biases have persisted. And that's a form of racial trauma. But if you think about trauma as any event that you may have witnessed directly or witnessed indirectly that makes you feel unsafe, that makes you feel unnurtured, that comes as a surprise, which could include microaggressions, which could include direct racism, it impacts us at the cellular level. And it can make people more depressed. If you look at Black women who, independent of their social economic status, have the highest rate of preterm birth and low infant birth weight children, babies, it's directly attributable to racism. And so racial trauma is real and is now, you know, over the past decade has been studied more and more. And so what we need to know as parents is, you know, we can't always shield our children from bad things happening to them, but we can shore them up by what happens in our household, by reading Black history to them, by sharing our stories, by making them understand that race, the color of your is a social construct, but it's your ethnicity, the group that you identify with. It's how you feel. It's finding, you know, the beauty of our history that they can take out there in the world. And it's a real effort. So knowing that, you know, personally, I'm not that optimistic that we're going to solve racism in my lifetime, but I do feel like examples like Michelle, examples like Booker, who are out in our communities, and I'm sure your daughters and sons who on the call, parents on the call, your daughters and sons, they're making a difference, and that's going to help. But we have to get our children ready for really armors to protect who they are as individuals and to find just the richness of our history that preceded them. Frederick Douglass taught himself to read at 5 so that he could teach other formerly enslaved people how to read. And there are so many examples of that self-sacrificing that give me energy, that make me proud, and stories within our own families. And we have to tell those stories and to give our kids that quest to achieve, and certainly that quest to educate themselves.
Thank you so very much. I see that we've already gotten questions in the chat. And so I have the distinct honor and pleasure of passing the baton to Carla D. Brown, the Eastern Area National Trends and Services Co-Chair, who will bring forth the audience questions. And thank you so much for allowing me to be in this conversation with each one of you. I've learned something from each of you, and you've each taken my breath away. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Brathwaite. So we have 2 questions in the chat. The first is, how do we develop support systems?
Booker, do you want to?
Yeah, so is that from the perspective of someone who is in need of a support system?
Yes.
That's a good question. I think it starts with, I mean, naturally you'll make friends and you'll network and you'll meet people. But I think it really starts with kind of being intentional with some of the questions that you ask. Because sometimes people, get along and have chemistry and all of these great things, but they don't really talk about topics. They don't really talk about these things. So I think it really starts with the intentionality behind what you want that group to represent. So are you actually asking questions? My friends, they asked about the mass shooting in Buffalo. I hadn't actually heard of the headline until someone in our small group chat had actually mentioned it and had sent it, and then I was informed. So are you actually asking those questions? Are you being intentional about that conversation? And then when you ask it, it's more than just, oh, have you guys heard of this? Okay, cool. Like, let's move on. It's, how are you guys doing? How are you feeling? And it's not going to be necessarily on a regular cadence, but when you're thinking about those people, you reach out. So there are times where we haven't chatted for about a week or so. And in my head, I'm like, we chat almost every day. So maybe I'll throw a message in there that says, hey, how's everyone doing? Has it been a week for you guys as well? Just really, I think it's just the intentionality behind it. And not necessarily going on autopilot with a lot of your interactions and responses. Since someone can ask, how are you doing? You'd be like, I'm fine. When you're not really fine. You have to, at least for me, I know it's something I've had to unlearn is answering those things on autopilot. If I'm not feeling fine, I'll say, honestly, I'm tired. Or honestly, this has been a great week. I'm feeling good. Or honestly, I don't really want to talk about it right now. Mm-hmm. So it's just about adding intentionality on top of what's already there, because you'll naturally gel with people and create these groups. But I think it's about that extra step of intentionality behind it.
Thank you. Michael, Michelle, would you like to add?
Yes, and I think on top of that, also understanding what type of support you need, because for some people, like I know for me, getting the questions sometimes makes me shut down because I maybe emotionally don't know how to articulate my thoughts yet, or maybe I'm not in a place where I even know how to put together the trauma I've experienced or seen or listened to, or like we talked about, trauma comes in different ways. But understanding what you need. I know that, in terms of the support system that I've put together, friend group wise, family wise, what I need sometimes is just someone just to sit next to me, or just to feel like I'm not alone. And then eventually a conversation organically will start. Or maybe like part of what I like to do is just sit in the kitchen, watch my mom cook or watch a friend cook, or just have a sense of community, but that's the type of support that works for me. But that type of reflection is really important when searching for that support system, because you can't go looking for people to help you sometimes if you don't even know what type of help you need. So yeah.
And I would just add, for parents, even teaching our children how to think about things, maybe even a red, yellow, green, with red being hot. So, green, somebody, a friend, easy to reach next to you on a group chat. Yellow mean that you may need a higher level of intervention. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a teacher, maybe, it's a guidance counselor. And the red, like if there were an emergency and you were depressed, or you felt like you were going to hurt yourself, or felt out of control, like, who can you call? Is it 911? Is it your doctor? Is it a hotline? So really getting our kids prepared in that way as well, knowing that there are ranges of the support that you may need.
Thank you very much. Dr. Taylor, the next question is for you. Can you discuss factors leading to the unprecedented levels of violence?
Well, so if you look at the statistics, the numbers of mass shootings, let's say mass shootings or shootings that occur with 4 or more people, those numbers overall have not increased. Thankfully, we know a lot more about them. It's not a surprise that during COVID, there were no school shootings. Schools are closed. And so now, unfortunately, we're having tragedies. There have been a number of for the first time, I think in 20 years, there have been the number of homicides has increased in major cities. And that's of concern. I think part of the reason is that people are out of their routine. Over the past couple of years, mental health clinics or community centers, programs have closed down that would schools have closed that would have been real structure and opportunities to notice when people were not doing well. And so we have a problem right now with access to guns and with access to young people who may feel hopeless, may feel like they don't fit. Or we have policies that exclude folks, the same folks. Unfortunately, I think the media targets Black on Black crime without looking at the reality that the biggest risk right now in America is domestic terrorism and, white supremacists who feel like they can do anything to people who are Black, brown, Jewish. So I think we have to read carefully in the headlines, but we need gun control. We need to get back to this source of one humanity, and how we can, who can we touch one person at a time? So just to be kinder, to understand people, to not shut down on people or feel like we have the right just because we disagree or just because we don't like the way somebody looks or their gender identity or sexual orientation, to touch them with our hands. And it's concerning. It's concerning that we're losing this moral impulse control that seemed to keep people in check, and it seems like we're really pushing at that layer a bit. It's not just, I don't think it's just related to more access to mental health. We really need to look at how we can shore up programs and keep people housed, get people fed, get people educated in ways that give some hope.
Thank you very much for that response. We have the chat. There's a member of an SGA, the president of the SGA at Benedict College, excuse me. She states that an Instagram story expressed a cry for help. And as an officer of a student government association, she reached out to the student to be supportive and offer the proper resources for assistance. As SGA, what programs and systems can she implement on her college campus that can serve as a check-in for students to prevent similar things?
Well, I can go and then you guys can chime. Well, thank you for doing that, number one, because reaching out and just not letting a story sit is important. Having groups and where people get to know each other, not just in times of crisis, but just as that connectedness is so important. So just having drop-in groups where, that can be, certainly they don't have to be staffed by a mental health professional, but having someone on call if someone has an issue. Every community has resources for people who may be uninsured or underinsured, have insurance, that you can have a sheet that has that. Certainly there are chat lines, suicide helplines, just having something that has those resources easily accessible to people on campus, but then just getting people together so they can talk and just really build community is important. So that way, when someone does feel like they may do something to hurt themselves, there's some trust there and you can get them the help that they need.
Yeah, I would agree. I think facilitating that community is probably the biggest way to help, especially in college. And I think that with the role in SGA and being able to cultivate that community and just create spaces. I know at Spelman we would have like mental health Mondays and we would do check-ins. And it was something as simple as just meeting in like the student union. Whoever needed to come up to the table just came up. If it meant not speaking, but maybe writing down your thoughts. We would have moments where we would just journal together. Sometimes there's power, in silence, and not everyone needs to know what's going on, but just having a space dedicated to writing down your thoughts. Because sometimes, in isolation, we can spiral or we just don't have the support that we need. Like we talked about that trauma dumping, you want to be careful of creating a space where everyone's just, piling on, because that can become heavy, but there is definitely power in just making sure no one feels alone, especially in college. So yeah, and kudos to you for checking in, especially via social media.
Agreed. The only piece I think I could add is I won't say pressuring the institution, but really coming at the institution with an idea of what you would want to see changed. I think it's one thing to say, this is wrong, and this is wrong. And it's another thing to say, but here's what you can do about it. So I think a piece of that would be, take the influence that you have as members of the SGA, since, they have a lot of influence typically on campus, and really survey the crowd. What would people like to see? What kinds of spaces do need to be created? What kinds of staffing needs to be targeted by the institution? And then figure out, how does the institution act on that? And then come up with accountability measures as well. So if there's, well, let's say that the students request 5 or 6 additional counselors to be hired and staffed by the school, I think it shows extra intention if you go in and you say, here's what this could look like. Here's a space that it could be. Here's at least a general idea of what it could look like for the students. I think that's really important, kind of getting the institution involved and making your voices heard. I think that's the only piece I would add.
Thank you so much. This is certainly a timely conversation. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. However, I do want to recognize Dr. Taylor again and thank her for her book, Courageous Classroom, Creating Cultural Students. It's in the chat, and please make sure to support her. I'd like to thank Michael, Michelle, and Booker for their awesome insights. I think it's important, as you know, you all are closer to the younger people that are being affected now. So we really do appreciate what you have done and what you shared with us tonight. And lastly, I would like to say that this session has been recorded and it will be downloaded and found in Eastern area of the links website in 48 hours. We really do appreciate all of you coming. It's been an exciting time. We also have a Google list, a Google sheet that will be put into the chat also that has a lot of resources around mental health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us.
Dr. Taylor, Booker, Michael, Michelle, I think they're gone.
Sorry, I butchered Michael Michelle's name. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was awesome. We're getting so many notes and text messages about this panel, Dr. Taylor. Thank you, Link Sister.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Be safe, everyone. Thank you so much.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
Continue.
Good night,
All right,
my
bye.
sisters. Thank you,
Good
Book and
night.
Light. Good
Good
night.
Good night.
Thank you for those comments, Nick. Thank you.
I can't help myself.
Advice.
So it was timely. It was divine.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Indeed it was.
It was divine. So blessings to
On
you
the
all.
prayer.
Peace and blessings I see in the
Mhm.
chat. Blessings
Yes.
to you all.
Yeah.